Testing.
Oh, there I am. I'm good. Oh, so we're live. Okay. Well, welcome. That's all I can start with. Let's have a word of prayer and we will get started. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for getting us through this part of the day. We've learned and we've been challenged. Help us, Lord, to move forward. We're asking in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so good. We're the day is flying by. There's a bit of a technical problem that I did not communicate to Paul earlier. I should have. It's my mistake. When I go to a church, soup and crackers only. That was too much food. It was like, we're in trouble this afternoon. We are in trouble. I know for some of you it's been a long week that you come to church and you have a potluck like that, but because of grace, I allow everyone 2 minutes to nod off. You each get a 2-minute nod off period. You can only use it once. You can't keep falling asleep. So if you don't want to use it up, just take a look, go to the restroom, get some water or something like that. But the time is going to go fast. We're going to cover a lot of information from our time here. We will recap what happened in Sabbath school. And I'll show you that everything that happened during the 11 o'clock hour was intentional. Everything I did today, I'll do next time at the next church. Same exact principles and for the same effect. And I'll tell you what I was striving for. So this workshop is called Flight Time Teaching. And I know, Carol, you said you got my first book, but my second one is Flight Time Teaching. I got some copies here. If you would like, if the church isn't sponsoring them, you can get one for a donation. And I want to be serious about this. I would say a donation of $15. But if you say, I don't have any money, because donation, you can take the book. I'm not saying you have to buy the book. You just take it. But let me sign it and take pictures of me signing it, because then I'll post that on Facebook and I'll look famous signing my book. So let me get something out of the deal, okay? But it's called Flight Time Teaching, and here's why I call it that. You know what that is, right? That's an airplane. So we're going to cover the 3 basics of being a facilitator. We'll talk about the ministry and all that, but I really want to talk about facilitation skills. There's 3 jobs that you have as you are the pilot. This is your class, but you are the pilot of the plane. You got 3 jobs. You got to get the plane up in the air. I'll explain what that is. You have to take them to their destination without getting hijacked. And then you have to land someplace. So I'm going to walk you through each one of those. We'll talk in detail. The plane is not up in the air until you have hands in the air. Until you have participation, you're just going from gate to gate, tarmac to tarmac. And we'll talk about landing someplace that's relevant. We'll answer all these questions, but I want to just give you 3 things to start with so we can get started. I'm going to give you 3 eyes. And sorry if you can't see that from where you are, but I'll read it out. I mentioned earlier this morning that in most churches, Sabbath school is dying. A lot of churches, it's just dead. And we try different techniques to grow Sabbath school, and nothing seems to work. Some churches say, well, let's flip Sabbath school. We'll have Sabbath school, second, 11 o'clock service. Once the novelty wears off, no one's coming to, they don't care if you flip it. People go where they find value. If I don't find value, I'm not going. I don't care how much you beg me or guilt trip me. You can say whatever you want. I'm not going. That's just our generation is different. When I grew up as a young man, there were no options in life. You had zero options. Whatever your parents said, you did. Your parents carted you off to Sabbath school, that's where you went. But now I could just look on my smartphone. I can see Sabbath school all around the world. Church service all around the world. So why am I going to get up and come here at 9:15? It better be worth my while. So if you tell me to come here at 9:15, 9:30, whatever time your Sabbath school starts, it better be worth my while. So we'll talk about how to make sure. So I'm going to give you the 3 I's to get started with. The first one is information. This is what Adventists are the strongest. No one can touch us on biblical information. We have that information locked tight. We have the Conflict of the Ages series, Great Controversy, Patriots, Prophets, Prophets and Kings, Desire of Ages, Acts of the Apostles. We have all the information we need about Bible stories. You can't touch us when it comes to information. However, I'm not coming out in the morning for a history lesson. I'm just not going to do it. And I love Sabbath school. If you want to do a history lesson, it's just going to be us old people. Your sons and your daughters, your grandchildren will not come. All right, just for information. So let's see what we need for Sabbath school to grow. Not only do I need information, which I do need, I need inspiration. And we're going to look at how Jesus taught. The greatest teacher of all, how did he teach? It said there were so many people. One time the lady tried to touch him. He said, "Who touched me?" His disciples said, "Look at all these people. How can you say who touched me?" But the Bible also says that the common people heard him gladly. So we're going to see how we can mimic our teaching. But the one that we're going to spend the most time with for improving what we do is interaction. How do I get people to participate? The traditional way of teaching Sabbath school in many churches, not saying this one, I'm not saying this church, but in many churches, is it's either a lecture or a mini sermon. I'm not coming to either one. You can only get me one time. But if I find out that's what's happening, I'm not coming back to that. But if it's interactive and I get to think and participate, then I'll enjoy it and I'll tell my friends about it. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this last one. We'll talk about inspiration, but we have to move past just giving information, just giving factual information. That's good, but all right, any questions about this as we get started? Okay, all right. If you have any questions, you just raise your hand. We'll get it going. Let's get this on. All right, here's the number one question. Really, there's 5 questions that are part of this packet, but we're only going to have time to do one. Maybe another time we'll do the other 4. But here's the first one, and I need your help. When you think about Sabbath school, what are we trying to accomplish? I don't care, like if you're a teacher or superintendent or whatever role you play, it doesn't matter. I want to know, what are we trying to accomplish when we have Sabbath school? Don't everyone say it. What? So we're trying to have, one second, you said teaching, and you said closer walk with God. What else are we trying to accomplish? Interaction? Okay. What else are we trying to accomplish? Discipleship. What else are we trying to accomplish? What was that? So excitement? All right, what else are we trying to accomplish in Sabbath school? Inspire? Okay, we're trying to accomplish inspiring. Okay, so I'm looking, what was that second part you said? A better walk? Okay. Okay, yeah. All right, that's good, yes. Anybody else? I mean, why do we do this every week? Just to fill the time slot? Anybody else? What are we trying to accomplish? So that was a lot of words. Fortify, I'm just going to say with truth. Is that okay? That's a good one. Anyone else? I got room for one more. Answer questions. I got room for one more. What are we trying to accomplish? This is the question for a Sabbath school team. Really, if I was talking to a church of pastors, this would be the same question I would use. Yes? How to make better disciples. I got something about discipleship there. Okay. All right. So that goes on. Okay, so let me tell you what I have. I asked you, what are we trying to accomplish in Sabbath school? You told me teaching, closer walk with God, better relationship with God, interaction, discipleship, excitement, fortify with the truth, know God's character, answer questions. As an authority on Sabbath school, that's unofficial. As an unofficial authority on Sabbath school, I visited more Sabbath schools than probably anybody else. I can tell you in most of our Sabbath schools, none of that stuff happens. None of it. It's all theory. It's not happening. For that to happen, we're going to have to be intentional. How are you going to be intentional if you never talk about it? So we're going to talk about that. How do I, because, and I'm surprised that there was one thing on here I didn't see. I'm really a little taken aback. Yes, please. Structure. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, that's interesting. There's one on here, there's something missing on here that I just knew someone was going to say, and no one said it. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yes.
I don't know how to put this, but there's one teacher, one Sabbath school teacher we have here at this church, that every time I sit through his class, it makes me cry.
In a good way or a bad way?
Yeah, in a good way.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
No, he says things that are from the heart.
That are touching. Beautiful.
And again, I won't name names.
Okay.
We need to be competitive.
Right.
Brings out the, I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it.
I think we get the gist of it.
Recently that's what happens, that person is getting to the nitty-gritty of why we're all here.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm looking for one thing before I talk about your list that I thought would be on here. Okay, like a gauge of the spirituality. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, yes. Okay, let me just tell you what it is that I thought somebody would say. That I'm looking, I know it's implied, so don't think I didn't see the implication, but no one said the word Bible. I know it's implied, get to know God more, discipleship. So that's important. I'm going to talk about that in detail later. For all these things that happen, we're going to have to be intentional. How am I going to get people to have a closer relationship with God if I'm reading the lesson to people who have read the lesson?
Thank you for saying that.
How is that going to happen? How am I going to get people who've been in the church for 50 years to know God better from my Sabbath school teaching? I got to be intentional. It's not just going to happen because I say, honey, where's my quarterly on Friday? And we find it and I underline some stuff. That's not going to work. So we're going to see how we can do this. Because if I went to a Sabbath school that had all these elements, I'm coming back and I'm going to tell my friends. Yeah, I'm going to say, man, this is a great class. You know, they got folks over there crying in class and stuff like that, and answering questions. I haven't been to a class in years where people have asked questions and got like I came to the class with questions. I guess it happens here, but I rarely see that. So we're going to see how we can make this happen. All right, let's go ahead and get started. You might want to take some notes or write on your smart device. Teaching must be more than repeating what we already know, the people who already know it. It's got to be more than that. And some of us have been in this church for years. We just finished a quarter on State of the Dead. Do you remember that? It wasn't too long ago, was it? Most people in our Sabbath schools are not in any doubt that the dead are dead. How am I going to make that do all those things you said it to be when we already know that the dead are dead? So we're going to talk about how to do that. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. I don't have enough superintendents for this. So Paul, this is just for you. Okay. And if there's a superintendent from another church, it's just for you. And then we'll move on from the superintendent section. The question that you must ask when you look at how Sabbath school runs is, why are we doing that? Whatever that is. And who does it benefit? Let me tell you a quick story. So one time my wife and I went out of town to visit relatives, and I wasn't going to speak anywhere, but I wanted to go to the church because I wanted to see how, I like to go to church, see how they do Sabbath school. Maybe something I could learn. At the time I was superintendent at my church, and there was a church in town, really nice church, but I got there too early. There weren't enough cars in the parking lot, and I didn't want to be the first person in the church because I'm a visitor. And a visitor does not want to get embarrassed. That's just a side note. Anything we can do to keep a visitor from getting embarrassed, the better their experience will be. Finally, enough people came in, and I went inside the church. It was an attractive church, and I sat down, and they were, doing song service or something. That particular Sabbath, the superintendent was late. In his defense, I don't know why he was late. It could have been a car broke down, someone's sick in the family. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying it was late. And when he came in, he came up to the podium and he did his, little talk. And there was a lady in the back. I guess she had been out sick. And he said, "Oh, it's so good to see Sister so-and-so back." And everybody said amen. I believe I was the only visitor that day. But he never welcomed a visitor. Maybe because he was rushed. He'd just come in. Maybe that's why. So, okay, that's fine. So then it was time, and this was a traditional sort of church. When it was time for lesson study, people got up and went to their class. When they got up, I was just sitting there. It was time to separate for class. I'm just sitting there. And I'm just sitting there. I'm a visitor. Thankfully, a lady came and sat next to me. Okay, so it was me and another lady. We were not hugged up like y'all were. I want to make that clear. We were sitting a little further apart than you two were. Let me see if that's a good ratio there. No, that's a good ratio back there. But don't use this couple's example. That's not how we were sitting. So, she sat there, and the teacher came, and he shook my hand. So he shook my hand. From that point on, he never looked me in the eye again. Now, there are just two of us, so he would say, can I get someone to read Monday's lesson? And I'm sitting right there. He won't look at me. I'm thinking, what's wrong? Is there something on my face or something? I don't know what's going on. Finally, a few more people came. It was so obvious after Sabbath school was over. Everyone got up and they went to their normal seats. No one came over, said, hey, you're visiting, where you're from, so-and-so. They just went to their seats. I said to myself, if this is the attitude of the church, I'm not staying. I'm not going to stay. Got up. And I walked out, and I stopped at the hostess table. I said, well, at least I need to go and see the children's classrooms so I can tell Sister Ellerby, hey, Sister Ellerby, I saw this, I asked the lady at the hostess table, where's the children's classroom? She said, I think they're down that way. That's what she said. Maybe she was temporary. I don't know. I'm just visiting. And I went down there, opened up a door. It was a broom closet, so I knew I was in the wrong part of the church. I just left. Here's the tragic thing. As a good, loyal Seventh-day Adventist, I know that when I go to a church to save myself some embarrassment, I have to come with an offering. You can't be a visitor or Adventist, and they're going to pass out the offering plate. So you got to have your Sabbath school money in one pocket and your 11 o'clock money in the other pocket. Guess where my 11 o'clock money went? It went back in my wallet. Churches are begging for money and help and resources, and how we either not treat people or treat people makes all the difference in who stays. So anyway, I told you I went there to learn. Oh, I learned a lot that day. From that day on, we started doing 2 welcomes at my church. When Sabbath started and when it ended. I didn't want anybody to have them. But here's what I learned. And I practice this to today. My drawing is not the best. I practice to today. Everything that we do in Sabbath school, from here on out, you're going to hear me say this, should be done from the eyes of a visitor. What I'm going to say now is going to sound rough, but I'm going to say it anyhow because I haven't found a better way to say it yet. I don't care what y'all think. My wife doesn't like me to use slang language, but she's not here. I don't care what y'all think because y'all are going to come. You don't care how bad it is. You've been coming for 30 years. You're going to keep coming. You don't care how bad Sabbath school is. That's what you've been doing all your life. But your son or your daughter, your grandson or your granddaughter won't come. I don't care what you think. We're going to find a way to do Sabbath school so it will be inviting to a non-Seventh-day Adventist. I want to know what the visitor sees when they come into Sabbath school. I want to know what the visitor hears. I remember one time I went to West End. This is a big church in Atlanta. It's like big like Atlanta, like Berean, my home church. And at that time, there had to be at least a dozen Sabbath schools in the sanctuary. And as soon as you open up the door, it was like, whoosh, just noise. But that's how we do Sabbath school. The visitor is like, what is going on? They're in there arguing over these little books. They're not even Bibles. They're arguing over. I don't know what they were thinking. But anyway, so this is the premise that we're going to do. I'm just telling you, this is what matters to me. How does a non-7-day Adventist, or even somebody familiar with, how does a visitor benefit from Sabbath school? I do not believe we can grow Sabbath school by ignoring this. And we're going to talk about what that looks at. Okay. So, Paul, back to you. What are we doing? Who does it benefit? If the visitor is not in that top list of who does it benefit, we should stop doing it. That goes for 11 o'clock service, but they didn't ask me to come to talk about 11 o'clock service. But in Sabbath school, I believe that principle holds. There's some, I can remember in the old days, now I'm looking at some of y'all are going to know what I'm talking about. In the old days, we used to do something called the Secretariat's Report. Anybody remember the secretary report? You don't remember that? Oh, man, that was great. They'd ask you, well, how many articles of clothing did you pass out? Yeah, how many people did you help? Yeah. And then we say, okay, the secretary would get up and say, last week we had 2.5 visitors who came out, and we collected $12. Who does that benefit? Why am I taking time to talk about last week and all that? Anyway, so that's the question. But that's all I have for superintendents right now. Let's talk about you as a Sabbath school teacher, which is, I think, the primary goal. First, I want to tell you there's no shortcut. You got to put in the time. Before we even talk about what that looks like, there's no shortcut. And sometimes your week can be long and brutal, and finding time to prepare is a challenge. I'm a witness. But you got to do it. As I mentioned earlier, you can't come in and find a quarterly on Friday. If your class is 45 minutes, you have to put in at least 4.5 hours. Maybe that's researching. Maybe that includes praying or writing out your notes. And I'm going to share my outline in just a few seconds, but there's no shortcut. That's all I want to say. No, that's not all I want to say. Sometimes it gets tiring in ministry. Sometimes you just don't want to do it. Anybody ever? Don't nod, but sometimes it just gets tiring. But what I realize is that Sabbath school has saved my soul. Because I have to be a Sabbath school teacher, it has forced me to live my life in a certain way. There's certain things I just can't watch. I'm teaching Sabbath school. There's conversations I cannot engage in. I'm a Sabbath school teacher. For some of you, you might be tired of being in Sabbath school, but it might be saving your soul. I don't think we'll ever come to the time where I'm on my deathbed and I say, man, I wish I hadn't studied my Bible as much. Man, why did I spend so much time praying? I should have been watching Netflix or something. You can only benefit you. Okay, let me just keep going. Here's the number one class, number one for our teachers. All right, so let me just find my notes. Yes, okay. I want to shift your focus on, as a Sabbath school teacher, from getting through the lesson. My job, or I should feel, my emphasis is not on helping you to get through the lesson. I'm going to disappoint you if that's what you're hoping. How do I get through the lesson? Number one question is, how is this lesson going to help the people in my class? Next week, we're talking about husbands and wives. Who's teaching next week here? Do you know? Who's on the schedule? Oh, I think, oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so I told him he could see a recording of this, hopefully. Okay, great. But that's going to be the question. How do you talk to people who know these principles in a way that it helps them? All right, so let's see how to do it. Oh, Paul already owes that lady, Deborah, you owe Deborah money, $40. We'll see if we get, Deirdre, you owe Deirdre $40, okay. Let's just do this. At the end of my Sabbath school, what do I want people to leave feeling? What do I want them to leave feeling? Ideally. Valued? That's a good one. All right, anybody else? All right, why would they say it was time well spent? What do they need? What would they feel to say that? What else do I want people to feel? Wiser? All right. Convicted? Okay, so what is that? Well, how would I say that? So value maybe covers that. Okay, what do I want them to feel? Challenged, yes. Enthusiastic. And then challenged. Anything else? What do I want them to feel? Okay, I'm going to give you an answer. And we're going to look at how Jesus taught. And at the end of my class, there's certain things that I must have happen. And I try to make sure that happens every time I teach. I try to make sure that happened today by God's grace. And at the end of my class, this is what I want. I want people to leave with two things. Along with those other things you said, I want them to leave inspired and encouraged. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I want to inspire them to reach higher in their Christian experience. And we talked about some things today are a challenge for all of us to reach higher, but I also want to encourage them for everyday life. So on Monday, that visitor who's in my class can think about what we talked about on Monday. Those are the two things. If I leave your class inspired and encouraged, I'm coming back to your class. If I just leave informed because you gave me a lot of facts, I probably won't come back. I'm just not going to drive to get there at 9:30. But if somehow you can do that. Listen, when Jesus taught people, it was so amazing. You all remember the story that time he was teaching and he had all these people there and his disciples said, send these folks home. They've been here all day. You remember that story? And Jesus turns around and tells the disciples to feed these people because he inspired and encouraged people. When he did the Sermon on the Mount, it blew their minds. They never heard anything like that. Okay, so let's do a few quotes and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty. And this is from Mind, Character, and Personality, page 32. Satan's work is to discourage the soul. I'm just going to pause there. That I've been to too many classes where it's a negative tone, usually about other people. And that's not our job. Satan's work is to discourage the soul. Christ's work is to inspire the heart with faith and hope. So I'm claiming, Lord, how do I do that? I'm going to share my favorite text in just a second. Jesus gave a message of hope and trial, of comfort and sorrow, and heavenly light and darkness. I think that's from Christ Object Lessons, if I'm not mistaken. As Sabbath school teacher, here's what I do. I'll tell you what I did today so you can see if it worked or not. First let me ask this, and don't be afraid to hurt my feelings. How do you think the 11 o'clock Sabbath school class went? You liked it? Do you know why you liked it? Do you have any feelings on that, thoughts on that?
There was the interaction.
The interaction? Yes.
More people were participating in that interaction, and you stay more focused. The whole person to stay more focused.
Because of the interaction. I don't know if you all heard her, but basically she liked the interaction, and she said it helped people to stay focused. It was a, well, thank you. I want to show you what I did so that I'm going to show you what I did. Let's just pretend this is the lesson quarterly for the week. Oh man, okay, let's just pretend. I'm going to use my thunder in just a second. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, and to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. What is the theme of those texts? There's no wrong answer, by the way. Anybody, what's the theme? Anybody else? What's the theme? What is love? Oh, that's deep. We're just going to pretend that is the week's quarterly right there. I just want to try to convey a point to you. That the disciples saw certain scenes. They saw the same scene, but they wrote about it differently. You find stories, and it's just a little different. We as Sabbath school teachers can look at the same quarterly, but something will jump out to you that might not jump out to me. As a Sabbath school teacher, I want you to track that down. You read over the quarterly, like I read over the quarterly the first day. I'm just trying to take in what the author is saying. I'm not trying to figure it out. But by the second or third day, I have discovered a theme, and then I start to investigate. What else does the Bible say about joy? What else? Are there other stories about joy? And I'll go over this a little later. I do not teach a Sabbath school lesson without going to the Ellen White estate. Anybody familiar with that? It's a website where you can search all her writings. So I'll put in certain things, and I search to see what she said about it. However, I will never lead a class by saying Ellen White said this. Okay? Anybody got a problem with that? Okay? I told you, I'm thinking there's visitors here. And the visitors, they don't know who Ellen White is. On our broadcast, we do a broadcast. Anybody ever watch Hit the Mark? I know Paul has. Hey, you know we're famous. Do you all know I was famous? I'm all over the world. So we have a weekly broadcast every morning at 9 o'clock Eastern time. It's on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Probably by the time a week is done, we do ours a week in advance. We have about 2,000 people that watch us. I know there's a lot of non-Adventists that watch us, so we can't say Ellen White said this. We have to be Bible-based. Our points have to be Bible-based. But that same principle I want to happen in the church. So let's see how we do it. I'm going to just walk you through it. When you're praying and studying, you have to have an aha moment. If in your preparation is just nothing there, you're not ready. James 1:5. Anybody know what the verse James 1:5 is? James 1:5. It's the text that I claim. Yes. Ask, James 1:5. He's going to pull it up on his phone. I can tell he's getting ready for it. Yes, I hear parts of it. To me, it's the most important verse for a Sabbath school teacher. And I claim it every week. Okay, what is it? Somebody read it for me, please.
If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, that gives all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given.
Okay. That's my promise every week before I teach. So I'm just saying, you should have an aha moment. If you're preparing for Sabbath school and nothing says, aha, I never saw that. I never thought about that. Chances are you need to keep studying. Because if you have an aha moment, your class will. And they'll say, I enjoyed your class today. I never thought about that today. But that's not going to happen. All right, let's talk about how to have. This is usually where I lose some of my crowd at. I'm just seeing, am I losing anybody right now? So far, so good. No one's left. I'm just leaving that up there for effect. So far, so good. I am adamant that when we teach Sabbath school, we should teach from our Bibles only. I'm mostly talking about adult. Lower division, you have your guides or whatever. I'm not really hammering this for lower division. But the adult classes, you should teach the lesson, not just teach anything. Like I read online, I go to SSNet, that's the site I use, and I read it all, and I digest it. But when I come to teach Sabbath school, this is what I come in with. And I'll explain what that is. Every week it looks similar. It tells me where to start. It tells me what to say or what I want to say. It gives me verses. I'm not saying go in and just wing it. But I want you to leave your quarterly in the car. Let's talk about it. Don't just say, okay, someone has got to have questions about that. No one?
It's like frying a can open with a butter knife.
Prying a can what? Prying a can open. Oh, with a butter knife.
With a butter knife.
Yeah.
To get people to start interacting.
I'm going to show you how to have interaction. That's not going to be a problem. Our problem is that the quarterly has become a crutch for Sabbath school teachers. I can just read it to people who've read it and call it a day. And it's absolutely boring. It's not boring for us because I'm an older person. I ain't got nothing else to do. I might as well come here and sit with my friends. I've been sitting with them for 30, 40 years. I love seeing my friends. But it's just us old people. I'm not going to come out for you to read a quarterly to me. I read it at home. Now, it is a crutch. I get it. I understand the nerves of being a Sabbath school teacher. There have been times I've been teaching as a young man. I just knew they could see my legs shaking in my pants. I knew it. I wasn't going to confess it. I wasn't going to say it. I was just going to bluff it like I wasn't, but I was terrified. But I want you to teach your Bible only. Okay, there's no pushback? Just keep going? No questions?
I just don't know how I can do it.
Thank you. Thank you. No. Okay, I'm going to show you how you can do it. And not only will I show you how to do it, I'll leave you my phone number so you can say, Curtis, I'm teaching. How does this look? Do you think this is going to work? And we'll go over, all the things that you have to do, okay? But I'm going to show you how to do that. I just want to just drill this home. I told you everything should be done from the eyes of come on, help me now. When a visitor comes into our Sabbath school, I want them to see us studying the Bible. They already think we're a cult. When they come in, they're not going to see us studying, even though it's a great book. I want to see us studying the Bible, talking about the week's lesson, okay? I have to say it, and I'm not saying this in a mean way, but it's just a truthful way. I'm an author. I told you I'm an international author, by the way. International. Someone in Canada bought one of my books. I am international, baby. Number one selling list at my house is the number one book being sold in my house. But I say all that to say, this is not an inspired book. I mean, no shade against the author. I'm sure they prayed over it and everything. It's not the Bible, nor is it the writings of the Spirit of prophecy. My book is great. It's not the Bible or the writings of the Spirit of prophecy. Yes? Yes, and I could tell he did it because I've never seen so many Bible texts on one page in my life. It's hard for me to filter through all that the author has put down. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do it, so it'll be good. Okay, I thought I would get some pushback. I've gone to churches where this has been an argument. It's been an argument where we had to really go into it. I told you for visitors, so let's talk about how you're going to do that. What is the top skill of a Sabbath school teacher? Top skill. What was that? What did I hear? Did you take it back? I was listening, but you took it back. Communication? Yeah, I guess that could go in there. Top skill of a Sabbath school teacher. Knowledge is more of an attribute, but I'm going to put it down. Encouraging dialogue, that's a lot of words, but I'm going to say And then you're giving me hard words I can't even spell, dialogue. You know what I'm talking about. What was that? Oh, hiding your fear. That's pretty good. Yeah. I'm not afraid anymore. But I can remember. Facilitate. What was that? Okay. Facilitate and then questions. That's the wrong spelling. And then I think I heard you say listening earlier, but you took it back. Okay. But I thought that everybody was supposed to listen to me as a teacher. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. It's definitely a skill. You have to hear sometimes what's not being said. Okay, so let's do it this way. You remember the very first Sabbath school class that Jesus taught? The very first Sabbath school class that Jesus taught. Where was that at? Very first Sabbath school Jesus taught in the Bible. When he was a teenager? Okay. Well, you have to be 13 to be a teenager. So you were warm, but I heard it someplace. He was 12. So in our culture, that's not a teenager yet. I'm just messing with you on this one. Okay, but he was 12. Does anybody remember the story about Jesus when he was 12? What was the story? What happened? How did he end up there? How did he end up there? Okay. Okay, let's just back up a little bit. His parents lost sight of him. Let's just back up for just a second. The greatest gift ever given to man, his parents lost sight of the greatest gift ever given to man, not because they were doing foolish things. They were just fellowshipping with fellow travelers, just like going to church. They were just fellowshipping, and they lost sight of the greatest gift. The reason I want to stop there is because too many times in my experience, that has been my experience, that I have lost sight of Jesus and I'm just going through the motions. Lost sight of him. Got to turn around. Where did I lose him at? That's what his mother did. She found him in a temple. What does the Bible say he was doing in the temple? What's it say? What does it say? Okay, all right. I heard parts of it, so let me just give you the text. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. When Jesus asked them questions, do you think he did not know the answer? You think he knew the answer? Well, if he knew the answer, why is he asking the question? To get them to think. There's something about asking questions that draws the person in. Let's just rewind this a second. Let's just say I said, now listen, class, the number one skill is from when Jesus was his first Sabbath school class, and in his very first Sabbath school class, the Bible says he was both hearing and asking them questions. And you all would have said, yeah, that's amen, amen. But because I asked you to be a part of the discovery, now you're all thinking. Now you're all involved. I'm hearing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comments because I asked a question. The number one skill of a Sabbath school teacher is the ability to ask great questions. I did not say hard questions. Some people want to ask questions that are just show that I'm so smart, I'm so deep. So I ask a question that no one can answer. And it's just crickets. This doesn't impress anybody. I need to ask questions to get people to participate. All right, so for another $20, does anybody remember the very first question I asked during the 11 o'clock service? The 11 o'clock service I'm calling, that was our Sabbath school discussion. Why? Wine? Oh, oh, okay. But there was a no, there was something I did before then to get the party going. I told you, as a pilot of my class, I need to get hands in the air. What was the first thing I did to get hands in the air? Do you remember? I'll give you a hint. I'm going to give you a hint, see if somebody can think about it. The title of the lesson was Living Wisely.
What is wisdom? What is it?
Yes. Okay. So the very first question, I did this at the last church I was at, just use a different word. I asked, and notice how I asked the question. I said, hey, we're going to be talking about so-and-so, and let's make sure we're all on the same page. What does the word wise mean to you? How many people can answer that question? No. Everyone can answer that question because I didn't say, what did the lesson say about being wise? What does the Bible say about being wise? What does the Spirit of prophecy? I just said, what does the word wise mean to you? I just need the hands in the air. I've already did my research. Already in my notes, I wrote it in my note what the definition is. You know, I did my research already. But I need participation. Even though someone gave me the perfect answer the first time, I said, does anybody else want to share? Somebody else, I said, oh, tell me what you mean by that. I know what the answer is. And even though they gave me the perfect answer, does anybody else want to share what the word wise means to them? I must have did that about 3-4 times, maybe even more than that. I just need hands in the air. Simple question. I don't tell people what it is. Now, you can start your class any way you want. I always start with a definition question. That's what I use. I don't tell people it's a definition question, but a definition question, anyone can answer. I just want to say, I need participation. So let's say we're talking about, next week is husbands and wives. Of course, careful. No, I'm not going to ask that question. Mama Esther, I'm not asking that. No. Let's go with something more generic. We're going to be talking about love today. So what does the word love mean to you? That's the question I'm going to start with. Even though I get the perfect answer the first time, I'm going to say, does anyone else want to share what it means? It's a non-threatening way. Okay, so that's the first thing I did, okay? So you with me so far? I'm getting hands in the air. I got to get the plane off the ground. I'm getting hands in the air. And I'll milk that as long as I can, and then I'm going to show you what I did. I'm anxious to move on, so guide your class with questions. I'll come back to that, not a lot of statements. Don't you do a lot of preaching. Just ask a new question. I'll come back to that. Here it is. I'm going to try to get ready for this one. You know how you go to a speaker or presentation, and they come to the point in the presentation where they say, if you forget everything else I told you. Have you heard that line? If you forget everything else I told you, make sure you remember this. This is my time to say that. If you forget everything else I told you, you got to remember this right here. This is the secret. Oh, I wish I had known this 25 years ago. I wish I had known the formula 25 years ago. Let me just tell you what I did. Let me just tell you. Here's a pointer on here. I don't think it works on the glass. Okay. All right, that's fine. I started the class by asking a question. I asked, what does the word wise mean to you? I got several answers. Really, there should be an S on the end of answer. I got several answers. Then I asked, can I get a volunteer to read? I can't remember what my first text, even though I could probably look at my notes. I think it was Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5, 1 and 2. After we read Ephesians 5, 1 and 2, my next question there's no exceptions for me. It had to come from what we just read. Like, we're not going to read it, and then I start talking about something else. So we read Ephesians 5, 1 through 2, and then the very next question was, well, what does it mean to walk in love? I already wrote it down. I know where I'm going with this. So somebody says, I think it means that. Paul says, walk even as he walked. Okay, that's great. Anybody else? What does it mean? I'm just doing the same thing. All I'm doing is asking another question. I'm getting multiple answers. After we exhausted that a little bit, I'm moving us on because I know where I'm going. I just said, can I get another volunteer to read? And then I don't know where we jumped to. We read verses 3. That's what we did about the fornication. After we stopped at verse 3, I did the same thing again. What do we see about fornication? I think I asked, which was the hardest sin or the most grievous sin? It was a trick question. But it's the same formula. I got multiple answers as I'm guiding the class to where I want them to go, and I'll insert some other things I did. I got multiple answers, and as soon as we exhausted it, I did the same thing. Can I get another volunteer to read verse 4? If you look back, that's all I did. I did this about 5 times, and our time was almost gone. And we're all looking at our Bibles. Even the visitors looking at their Bible if there's a visitor here. They're not trying to see, okay, we're at on Tuesday's lesson, are we at? We're looking at our Bibles. Okay, so questions on that. That's just brilliant. That's brilliant right there. I wish I knew who came up with that. That's just brilliant. Any questions on that? Now's your time. Is it too easy? Is it too simple?
Very similar to what Jesus did to the crowds.
What?
Very similar to what Jesus did to the crowds.
Oh, good point.
Where they were at.
Good point.
He was riddled with lots of questions, and he asked a question to answer their questions.
Jesus did 2 things a lot, and we'll talk about part of it in a second. 2 things that he did as a teacher. He told parables and he asked questions. That's what he did. He would tell parables in such a way that they were so involved in the story, sometimes they wouldn't even know he was talking about them. They were just caught up in the story, the way he told the story. So, any questions about that? I'll come back to that. This is for you. Any questions? Paul, go ahead.
Just curious on, the lesson today was, I prefer, because it stays in one chapter.
Yes.
Keep people.
Yeah.
Spend all this time flipping back on.
Yeah.
Some lessons,
Yeah.
50 books. I
Yeah.
just really don't enjoy teaching that. It kind of affects this, because you're spending more time jumping around. I'm just curious.
My thought is that as a teacher, you have the right to not cover all that information. I really just try to make 1 or 2 points in my class because it's just sometimes it's just too much. You're going all over, so I filter that out. If the class leaves edified and we had a great discussion and we had some aha moments, I'm okay that we didn't cover everything the author covered. I'm okay with that. So that's how I answer that. It's your discretion. If you feel like, hey, the theme for me is this direction, go with the theme for you. Whatever your main point is, go with it. Okay, I'm gonna keep going if that's okay. Any questions? Pretty straightforward. I started with a definition question to start everybody off. just to ease people into participating. Even though I can read the Bible well, I don't read the text myself usually. I get volunteers. Because there are certain people who will not raise their hand to comment, but they'll raise their hand to read. They're participating. They feel like they had a good time. That's all I want is participation. I remember one time I was at Berean, my ex church, and it was a large sanctuary. And for Sabbath school that day, there were about 1,000 people there. They weren't there for Sabbath school. They were there to get seats early for the church service. I wish I could say they came out, 1,000 people came for Sabbath. No, they didn't. But they were a captive audience, so I was going to take advantage of it. So we did our thing, did the same thing we did now. And I remember, I said, can I get a volunteer to read? And a lady on this side of the church all the way back who was a visitor that day, she raised her hand to read. I said, okay, can you read so-and-so and so-and-so? And so the elder, I remember Elder Barron, took the microphone over to her, and here's how she began to read. She said, children, and the elder said, children, obey your the elder said, parents in the Lord, for this is right. And he said, honor? She could barely read. I was so blessed. Here we are in a church with 1,000 people. She's so involved in the story. She said, I'll read. She knows she can't read, but she felt safe enough. She felt safe enough to say, I'll read. Oh, I don't have enough time to talk about that, but I am against classes that are mental fighting matches where we're matching wills against will and we're embarrassing people and condescending to people. I'm against that. Sabbath school should be a place where people, even the less educated, feel comfortable in sharing. Not just the smart people, okay? Not just the knowledgeable people. As a side note, if I'm teaching a small class, I am not hurt if everyone doesn't participate. I have no compunction to make sure everybody participates. I don't call on people, even in a small class. You just may be daydreaming. I think you're paying attention, but you're really just daydreaming. You're thinking about, man, I wonder if Carol has some more of that crisp at home. And you think I'm really paying attention. I'm thinking, I wonder, can I pack some up to take back home? So don't call on me because I'll be embarrassed. Okay, so that's my only point. Okay, all right, let's kind of keep going. This is making sense so far. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're okay. Y'all are hanging in there. I gave everybody a 2-minute nod-off period. I don't think anybody's used it yet. This is impressive. Okay. All right, let's talk about, okay. I heard this one earlier. I'm just going to fill in some of the gaps on what makes a good Sabbath school class. These next two, and we said it earlier, somebody else said it, was energy and enthusiasm. Everyone is feeding off of your energy. If you are dry, chances are your class is going to be dry. You need some, like I'm a shy person. I'm shy, I stay to myself, but when it's time to teach Sabbath school, I got to step out of that shyness because they're feeding off of my energy. There's a gentleman I remember, one of my old Sabbath school teachers. Man, what a good man he is. Just a godly man, well-studied, just a godly man. But when he taught, it was just too dry. It was just dry. And since y'all, I know your age group, so I know you'll know this. The real Star Trek. The real Star Trek. The one where Captain Kirk, that's the real one, right? Who was Scotty the guy in the engine room? Every episode, something was wrong with the plane, right? The ship, every episode. So Kurt be there, Scotty, can you give it just a little more? Every episode. And sometimes I want to tell a teacher, can you give it just a little more? Just, I'm not saying go crazy and run up and down the aisles, but just, they're feeding off of your energy. You got to give it a little bit, okay? If while you're teaching you just happen to do this and say, oh, wait a minute. There's no pulse. You probably should say, Paul, listen, man, I'm going to go to the hospital right quick. Can you take my class for a while? And I think Paul would agree to that. Okay. All right. The second thing is, so enthusiasm and energy. If you're not excited about your class, you think your class is going to be excited about it. But if I did my research, I had an aha moment. I was like, oh, I never saw that. Oh, I can't wait to investigate that. Chances are your class is going to really appreciate that, okay? Tell some stories, not your life story every time you tell a story. Tell some Bible stories. I think I did 3 Bible stories today. But if I'm going to tell the story, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to read the background of Acts of the Apostles. If I'm going to tell the story, I think I told my favorite one, Paul and Silas. I'm going to tell that story. I'm going to paint that picture. If I'm going to tell the story about the woman taken in adultery, I'm going to paint the picture like it's camp meeting time, and his sister Smith, who was the primary Sabbath school teacher, looks like they're being dragging her down the aisle, and everybody's crowded around her. I'm going to tell that story. That's what Jesus did. He told stories. The story of the Good Samaritan, one of the most famous stories. He told that story. And we're still repeating it today. So tell some stories, but tell the story. All right, class dynamics. I'm going to rush through this right quick. We're doing good on time. I'm just give you a few of the dynamics. I don't know if you have these here, but here's just a few. Brother University. Every class, every church generally has somebody who says, I'm educated. When they give an answer, even if it's the perfect answer, I always ask next, does anybody else want to share? Because I want to give that person who is not educated the same respect, okay? Sister Time Killer, when she speaks, it seems like an eternity. There's one in every church. When she talks, you just know we're going to be here a long time. And but in her defense, she's probably been locked up in her house all week. This is her only time to talk. So she wants to talk. But I only have 45 minutes. I got to control that behavior. I have to. And I remember training teachers, young teachers, the balance between being respectful, because we want people to just talk, but I have to control the class. Okay, you just can't let a person talk till you pass out and they pass out. You have to control the time. Let's see, I'm going to go over Brother Cliche. Every time he answers, it's a patented church answer. I don't let those stay on the floor. I think there might be visitors. So if you say something, I'm just going to say, tell me what that means. If you say we need to die to self, I'm going to ask you, what does that mean? If you say we need to surrender, that's how we're going to close it out. We just need to surrender, brother. I'm going to ask you, what does that mean? And my favorite one is if you say, and this usually happens when the conviction is starting to settle in and it's starting to get uncomfortable, and then somebody will raise their hand and say, brother teacher, all our righteousness is as filthy rags. That's our get out of jail free card. Don't hold me accountable card. That's not accurate in that setting. The Bible says the effectual fervent prayers of a righteous man. The Bible says, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. The Bible is replete with example after example of calling us to righteousness. not self-righteousness, which is what that text is talking about. Okay, so I don't allow cliches to stay on the floor. Let's see here. Brother, I'm right. When he gives the answer, that's it. He might give me the perfect answer. I'm going to say, does anybody else want to share? I'm not going to let that person be the one. Every time he answers, we have to move on. Sister Life Story. This is my favorite one. Bless her heart. Sister Life Story. She usually starts her story back in 1940. Back in 1940, I remember, and I know she's got to get all the way to 2023. How much time do I have? So when she inhales to get to 1950, I got to stop her. Say, hold up 1 second, sister. I want to make sure. And I take back over the class. Okay? Don't just say I got to let this, you know. That's why this morning, because I've never been to your church, I set the expectation up front. If you remember, I do this at every church I'm invited to. I set the expectation up front. I said, listen, we're going to have a great time. The time's going to go fast. I want you to feel free to say anything that you want to say as long as you keep it. And I do that twice. I do it for each side of the church, depending on the size of the church I'm at, because I'm setting the expectation up. I learn the hard way that if I don't control that behavior early, it can get out of hand. And people will think that they have liberty to just talk. Some people love to hear themselves talk. Some people love to hear themselves preach and rattle off. Listen, as Seventh-day Adventists, we could rattle off a bunch of church jargon without even trying. Brother, upset stomach, that's the person. There's something wrong with everything. I don't care what you're talking about. There's something wrong with the conference, the pastors, the music, the air conditioner. There's something wrong with everything. I said I want people to leave my class inspired and encouraged. I can't let negativity stay on the floor. Even if what they're saying is true, and I always use this example, they'll say, well, brother, the church is in a Laodicean condition. Usually when people say that, they're not inclusive of themselves. They're talking about the church, not me. And according to the book of Revelation, that is correct. But also in the book of Revelation, there was a sea of glass. There was a number that no man could number. That's what I want us to talk about. How do I get in that number? Great, you identified us as Laodicean. How do we get in that number that no man could number? That's what I want to talk about. Okay, all right, let's talk about hijacking. But we're making good time. Any questions so far? Yes. Thank you for that plug, Carol. I appreciate it. Yes, okay. So let's talk about hijackers. Do y'all have hijackers in Indiana? Plenty. Okay, sometimes it's the teacher's their own hijacker. But in some churches, where was I at recently? It was really bad. Where was I at? Have you heard the term shepherd's rods? Okay, I can't remember what church it was at. It was bad. And we have them on occasion in parts of Atlanta. Here's what a hijacker, we'll talk about how to deal with them. But I will say, if you read Sunday's lesson to your class, followed by Monday's lesson, followed by Tuesday's lesson, the hijacker has read that quarterly too. They know when to insert themselves. They know the whole plan. But a hijacker, unless he snuck in my house, he doesn't know which way I'm going. So it's harder for him to hijack me because he doesn't know my flight plan for the day. All right, so let's just talk about a hijacker. Some people hijack and they don't mean any harm. We talked about that. Some people just talk too much. They don't mean any harm. They just talk too much. But what do we do if a hijacker, someone has an agenda? How do we answer? Let's say you're teaching class and they just come out the blue. Let's see, what do we like to talk about? What's some of the things that hijackers like to talk about? What was that? Trinity. Non-Trinity, Trinity. Here's a favorite one. Jesuits. Everybody's a Jesuit. I think somebody told me I was a Jesuit once. I'm not sure. Like, when did that happen? I missed that. I barely graduated school. Where did I learn how to be a Jesuit? But whatever it is, they'll come in and they'll come to your class, they'll sit, and sooner or later, they make their move. Here's one principle. The first principle is, whoever is asking the primary question is in charge of the class. If the hijacker is now asking the questions, they've taken over your class. That's rule number one. Now, let's say a hijacker says something crazy. How do I answer something that's clearly erroneous, that's non-biblical? How do I answer that in my class? Anybody want to share some suggestions? Ask another question. That's pretty good. Anybody else? What do I do?
We got to be careful not to legitimize.
You're good. You're good, Paul. How do I do that? Let's say they say, I can't even think of nothing wild enough, but they'll say, let's just say that, I can't even think of just something wild. The church is this, the church is that, because usually it's talking about the church. How do I answer them on the moment? I'm going to give you 3 ways to do that, okay? I'm going to give you 3 ways. First, I'm going to tell you what not to do. Regardless of how crazy it is, how absurd it is, don't give an opinion, because then you legitimize the conversation. If you say, brother, that's not right, you just been hijacked. Because now he can come back and say, oh, yes, it is right. Turn right here, I'll show you. Don't give an opinion to a hijacker. Here's what I want you to do. Let's see, I think I might have it on here. If not, I don't think I have it on the slide, but I'm going to give it to you. Carol, it's in my book. Here. You're going to get a copy. You're so supportive. Double autograph. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to give you some answers to deal with hijackers. And you're going to have to say it with some force. Okay, here's the first one. Here's the first one. Let's hold that thought for now while we discuss this current subject and move on. Let's hold that thought for now. Here's a better one. Let's hold that thought until after lesson discussion, and then you and I could talk about it. Guess how many hijackers will come up to you afterwards to talk about it? 0. They're not looking for answers. They're looking for an audience. They want an audience. They're not going to come up to you later and say, can you explain to me why you're not a Jesuit? They're not going to do that. And then to be more forceful, you say, listen, I understand your point, but we're not discussing that today. And sometimes that's hard for us. In our Christian courtesy, it's hard for us to sometimes say that. But we have to say it. Listen, I understand your point. We're just not discussing that today. And go right back. Don't belabor it. Don't show any animosity. You just go right back to answering the question. Okay, that's hijackers. Okay, it's time for question and answers. Question? Yes, ma'am, please.
How about if hijackers, they don't necessarily ask a question, but something you're studying reminds them of something personal, and then they go off on a personal tangent.
Yeah, that's tough.
Getting back into
That's tough.
the work.
That's a tough one. The number one is, of course, set the expectation up front. That's what first thing I would say about we're on a limited time. Don't answer. Take back over. Let's say they got the mic and they say what they say. You go your direction. Don't feel the need to respond to what they said. Some people might not understand. I wonder why she didn't answer them. You know what's going on. So it's your class. All right? Any other questions about anything? Because we're winding up now. Anything? All right, I'll throw out some things while you're thinking of it. Yes, sir, please.
Well, I had a situation today in the foyer when a guy came in, and he was kind of baiting me like that, and I just answered with, I said, well, the Bible doesn't say that. You know, I don't see what you're saying to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept kind of staying on that, focused on that, because he was focused on something else. About basically it was about Genesis and how there was a world before this world, and and it was just, I couldn't make any sense out of it. But I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't see that, what you're seeing in the Bible like that.
But this is in the foyer.
This was in the foyer. This was not in class, but
Great.
It brought me. It was a visitor, but it brought me. What you have been saying brought the attention to me that you have to negate that in a way that is you just kindly but firmly, say, well, I said, well, I just couldn't. I said, I just didn't really see it.
Yeah.
See it in there.
That's a tough one. You have to have discernment. Some people really have questions. There are really some people that have confusion about things.
Right.
But there are people that have an agenda, and you have to have discernment to tell the difference.
Yeah. It kind of appeared that way, but I didn't get into it.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to belabor it, so I just kind of said, well, I didn't see it that way. We have to talk about this later.
Yeah. Sometimes in those cases, it's good, I shouldn't say pawn them off on, but it's good to point them in the direction of the pastor.
Right.
These sound like issues that, maybe the pastor can help you work through.
Right.
Excellent. While you're thinking of some questions, I want to throw out some things that some people ask me about. Number one is new believers class. Do you have a new believers class here?
We
When we have new believers.
yeah.
Okay.
After evangelistic series baptisms.
I believe that if you teach Sabbath school the way that I taught today, of course I embellished it a little bit because I knew it was 11 o'clock service, that it will suffice for a new believer. Like some places just don't have room for a new believers class. But if the person teaching Sabbath school, if your teachers are teaching from their Bible only, and they're doing the things that you said we were doing when we first started, I think that would be fine for a new believer. I was at a church a long, long time ago. I remember this discussion came up, and this lady, she got really irritated with me because basically she was saying, we need to keep them in the new believers class for at least a year before we let them come to the normal classes and find out how crazy we are. That's really what she was saying. She didn't come out, but she said, no, if they come to our class too early, we'll lose them. Like we need to get them rooted first before they come up here and hear this foolishness.
Sounds like she's part of the problem.
I can't argue that, but listen, Sabbath school done right is a method of discipleship. Not if we're just filling time. Well, I've been asked to be a teacher. Okay, I'm going to read this to people. That's not what we're talking about. Sabbath school done right is the greatest vehicle in our church for discipleship. There's nothing else. There's no other time where we as a church study our Bible together. If you're not doing that, you're missing an opportunity of having people. Listen, I assume, and not in a negative way, I assume most people in my class have not opened their Bibles all week. That's my assumption. My discussion is not based on their study. People say, well, Brother Hall, my class would be better, but my members don't study. That's still your problem. It shouldn't be dependent on their preparation. Did you prepare? Did you develop questions? Did you have a theme? Did you have a, here's a question that we're going to ask ourselves. Let's see if I got it on here. I think it's coming up. What is the takeaway? Like, why were they in your class today? Why? Those are hard questions we have to ask ourselves. The first question I told you earlier as a Sabbath school teacher, how is this lesson going to benefit the people in my class? You know the makeup of your class. So you might have to claim James 1:5. Lord, give me wisdom. I really don't know how to lead this class. Give me wisdom. He said, if you ask anything in my name, in my will, I'll do it. I believe that's in his will. So, is the takeaway, is it clear? Is it biblical? Is it relevant? And is it applicable? If I can cover all that, man, that's a good class. I'm going to come back. All right, anybody think of any other questions before we close out? I know it's been a long day for some of you. I want to thank you for hanging in there with me. It's been a good day. And what we want to do, as I've repeated this earlier, when we stand before God, when he asks us, what did you do with that class I gave you? I don't want to say, well, Lord, I just didn't, all that stuff, I didn't feel like doing all that. So I didn't really want to put in any effort. I just kept doing what I was doing. I want to say, Lord, I tried to multiply. Maybe I didn't hit the mark right away, but I tried. And we tried. And so my prayer is that this church will try. Just step up to another level, whatever that level is. Just never become complacent that there's nothing for else to do. I encourage, there's 5 questions that I have. Maybe I'll just, number 1 is, what are we trying to accomplish? I told you that earlier. Number 2 is, who are we trying to attract? That's the second big question. If we had time and we were together for a whole weekend, we worked through this on a board. Who are we trying to attract to Sabbath school? If I didn't allow you to say the word everyone, what would you say? Okay? That's the second question. My answer is, we need to attract some people between the age of 25 and 45. Because once we die off, I don't know, maybe they'll say, there ain't nobody coming to Sabbath school, let's just do something else. The third question is, how do we attract them? How do we attract people to Sabbath school? Does somebody get up on 11 o'clock and say, come to Sabbath school? Is that going to work? Somebody cook a big breakfast and say we're having breakfast? Is that going to work? People go where they find value. And we have to make sure that we're giving value. The next question of the 4 to 5 is, what are we doing well? Whatever that is, magnify that. If you say, well, we're doing X and Y well, then build on that. Take the positive. But the hardest question is the last question that takes honesty. What needs the most improvement? That's the hard question. We don't like to hurt each other's feelings. So even though I know that Sabbath school teacher is not effective, I can't bring myself to say that. Even though I know that the technology, the IT, the music, whatever, I'm just picking stuff at random, is below standard, I just don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But it takes honest conversations to move forward. We have to trust each other enough to know that it's not personal. You know me, we're friends, it's not personal. How can we move our church further? So that's the hard one. What needs the most improvement? And for many churches, we need different teaching methods. We need to start mentoring teachers, young people. Don't just have them come up and say, okay, you take a day. No, we need to find a better way to mentor our young people. Get them into the rotation. I'm not a lower division expert, but if I was here for lower division, I would say that the teens should be running their own class with our assistance. We should be grooming the next set of leaders so that they have investment in the church and they're not just spectators. So when they're 18, they're out the door. Give them some ownership in the church. All right, any other questions before we close out? I can't believe it. I know what it is. It was all that food. That's what it is. I know what it is because you're going to get home and say, oh, I should have asked them that. But all that dessert and stuff just clouded your mind. It's in the book, yeah. It's in the book that Carol told us about, yes. Yes, ma'am, please.
My question, but I really like that you walked down the aisle and walked up to people and looked at them.
Oh.
It felt like you were, like we were all in this together.
Oh.
Like you wanted to be a part of our group today.
Oh, thank you.
And I also wonder if this wouldn't also work very well in any kind of teaching situation, whether it be our gardening classes, our cooking classes, vacation Bible school. Can't we use this across the board?
Well, thank you for that. I really can't help myself. I just can't stand up there. I just can't. I would never be a good preacher. I just can't do it. My sister uses these principles for a prison ministry that she teaches for. She uses the same principles, and it's amazing the results she gets. So the principles are the principles. It works for small groups. It works for Bible studies. You just want people to be involved. You don't want to just be the source of all the talking. Not in today's culture. That just doesn't work for us anymore. I need to be involved in the discovery. That's why we ask questions. I want you to be involved. Even though I wrote down, I know the answer, I want you to be involved in the discovery. And then it'll be a light bulb moment for you. But thank you for that. Any other questions as we wrap up? Always aim high, yes. That's it. If that's it, I want to thank you guys for your attention. Paul, thank you for inviting me, for making this happen. Let's see here. You can't read my website. It's sabbathschoolcoaching.com. It's sabbathschoolcoaching.com. You'll find a link to my YouTube page where we do our online Sabbath school. So we do it a week in advance. So my team, I wasn't there today, my team did next week's lesson today. The reason we do it a week in advance, because I want teachers to be able to look at our video and steal some of our stuff. So you can say, oh man, I saw that on Hit the Mark. I'm going to use that in my class. That's what we want. That's why we do it a week in advance. So you could have all week, not only can you look at 3ABN or Hope Channel, you can look at Hit the Mark and say, oh, I think we'll use that. The key word today, my team used for next week's lesson, is the word mutual. So they built their whole conversation around mutual. I couldn't hear it all because I was getting ready to come, but that's what they built it on. How they use it, you're going to have to look at the video. But anyway, so Paul, please.
Well, I wasn't a Sabbath school teacher, now I'm downstairs, but still when I was up here. I love the E.G. White notes, a supplemental book. I love it. But I know you said you try to stick to this Bible, try to stick to, don't start with Ellen White quotes or whatever. Yeah. But I love it. I mean, when I was teaching up here, she came up with so many things I never thought about, right? Maybe I could just steal that. I don't want to just borrow it, I should say, kind of as my own. But what are your thoughts on those booklets or supplemental booklets? Are they value to you, or do you even use them?
Is what?
The E.G. White supplemental Sabbath school.
Oh, I love it. But I do my own research, but I have no problem with it.
Okay, because I know you said leave the quarterly in the car. You leave that in the car.
Leave the quarterly in the car. Yes, I said that. Like, I'm old school. Like, when I mean Ellen G. White, I mean, if you come in my home office, I got all the old books from the 1970s When I was a young man, every time I got paid, I said, oh man, I can get one more Spirit of Prophecy book. I got them all there. My only point was, I used what she said to validate, am I on the right track? But because I know I'm in maybe visitors, I just don't say Ellen White said. If I just have to do a quote, I'll say my favorite author. Because if I can quote, whatever the, favorite motivational speaker, I can quote Ellen White. But I went to a church, I think it was in Maryland, every comment was Ellen White said. Every comment. They didn't even say what the Bible said. They said, no, Ellen White said this, and they would read Ellen White passages. And at the workshop, I just had to say, this is not going to work. Not if you want to grow Sabbath school.
You could say this is a quote I found to be inspiration.
Yes, you could say that. But their whole Sabbath school was based on Ellen White quotes. Now, if you're not trying to grow, keep doing what you're doing. If you're happy where you are, just ignore everything I said. Just keep doing what you're doing because you're going to get the same results. But if you want to see change, and listen, I told you earlier when we did the first workshop this morning, don't quit. You won't see the results overnight. But if you can get one more person to come this month to Sabbath school, and maybe 2 more people that'll come next month, and maybe in a couple of months there's 3 more people that are coming, that's progress. The whole church just isn't going to come. That's one of my pet issues, but it's not anything I have the authority to fix. But we have to just do the best we can in the sphere that we find ourselves in. Any other questions as I turn it over to Brother Paul? Paul, thank you so much for making all this happen, for bringing me here from Atlanta. Thank you so much for your hospitality, for you and your wife. Mom Esther, thank you so much. Pastor Metz is not here, but, he helped make this happen. Thank you, guys. Reach out to me if you have questions. Just don't quit, okay? All right, Paul, I'm turning it over to you, man.
Well, and just thank you. We've got, I think, Tell City and Huntingford Church is watching online.
Oh,
so,
okay.
If you have questions, I'll grab some copies of the book.
Yeah, is that where they are? Hey,
Whichever one has a blue dot on it. I think.
Oh, there's a blue dot there.
Yeah.
Okay, I just waved to the masses. Oh, one other thing, if you do want a copy of the book, I'll sign it and off you go. Okay? All right, Paul, right. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Do you have prayer? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you again for a blessed Sabbath. We thank you for wisdom and learning here, how to convey the word to new people, to visitors, to make it appealing, to make it interesting, Lord, to make it convicting, most of all, Lord, to convict us of your love and your watch care and just the overall love you have for each one of us, Lord. Help us to spread that to everyone we encounter, Lord. Pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.